Crows began to fly over the area where our boy was fighting against the ancient god Slate. The attention of all nearby players focused on them. They felt somewhat confused and curious as they didn't know if what they were sensing was an earthquake, or if the movement in the valley meant that the boss was going berserk. Because of this, they decided to go take a look. With a curious look, the mage of the team asked where the hell Shadow was. According to her friend, there was no way he could defeat this boss, so he probably wouldn't come at all. The eyes of the swordsman of the party widened in surprise, asking his friends to come take a look. The place was empty. There was no trace of either King Fong or the boss, leaving the players in shock. They began to walk around the place and noticed that the ground was cracking, wondering if the earthquake had just killed the boss or what was happening. Captain Anu communicated with them and asked them to retreat since Shadow had already taken care of the boss. The eyes of the players filled with surprise and confusion. They could not believe that Shadow had defeated the boss alone. The coffins were empty, and the chains were broken. They remembered that just a moment ago, they still doubted that Shadow could defeat those 7 bosses. Now, barely 10 minutes later, all of them had disappeared without them noticing the arrival of King Fong. They wondered how he had done it, especially because the bosses were supposed to respawn. It was then that they began to understand their leader's decisions. Meanwhile, under the moonlight was walking King Fong with a slate in his hand. According to him, this time's haul hadn't been bad at all. His eyes began to shine with joy. He had leveled up to level 14. Thanks to the 7 bosses and the use of Greedy Hand, he had gained a total of 294 evolution points. Most importantly, however, was that he had obtained this ancient god's slate. Given its mechanics, the authorities wouldn't decipher it in less than a month, and the losses would be catastrophic. He spent 210 evolution points, leaving him with 115. His skill, Shadow Flash Slash, evolved from epic to legendary. The improvements were substantial. The blink range increased to 40 m, stealth duration to 15 seconds, and cooldown was reduced to 8.8 seconds. The skill now inflicted 9 slashes in a wider area of 6 m, and each hit added 700 attack power. However, the most impactful change was a completely new effect. Each slash now granted him a shield equal to 100% of his maximum HP, stackable up to 9 times and lasting for 60 seconds. Our boy was confident, and couldn't help but feel cheerful since from now on, if the 9 slashes of Shadow Flash Slash hit, his effective HP would become 10 times greater. His margin for error had just skyrocketed. He turned invisible and began to walk through the area, knowing that at his current leveling pace, he would reach level 15 in another 5 hours. Then, it would be time to head toward Magic City. Several hours later, our boy arrived at the ruins where the women were still beating up Xiao. They were willing to beat her to death. King Fong was somewhat surprised to see that they were still fighting. These women were quite ruthless. The white-haired woman began to stretch her arms to rest a little. She was exhausted and complained that her back and waist hurt. The friend was somewhat furious as her hand was swollen from so much hitting, and she complained that her hands were practically smoking from the fight. They spat on Xiaoyu and decided that it was enough for today. This beating should serve as a lesson. Xiaoyu, whose body was full of bruises and wounds, began to sit up. She couldn't help but cry. According to her, everything was King Fong's fault. She had told him to cut ties, and he had really ignored her, not understanding that when girls say something, they often mean the opposite. Using the magic staff, she stood up. Fortunately, she had signed a contract with the Knight's Sanctuary, so she wouldn't have to worry about her survival for the next 3 years. Although she had to give up 50% of her lifespan, she would still have some left for herself, ensuring that she would grow faster than Shu Yan and the others. She used the skill Holy Healing, which allowed her to restore all of the target's life. She was certain that once she became stronger, she would make sure that all those who had looked down on her wouldn't get away with it so easily. Neither King Fong nor those crazy women were going to escape. To everyone's surprise, the spell began healing King Fong, who was invisible. Poor Xiaoyu fell to her knees on the ground, thinking that she had failed casting again and wondering, puzzled, where the healing had gone. At the same time, in the Magic City ruins, several players were facing a boss made of rock. The boss attacked, but the party's tank blocked the attack using his shield. Not far away, there were 3 players hiding and watching the fight. Among them was also Qiang Shishi. According to her, Daxiao's men were really weak since they had sent 18 people for a single boss and were too afraid to fight. Her friend winked at her and asked her not to say that since they were working hard for their benefit, so they should be grateful to them. She blew him a kiss and laughingly mentioned that he was very polite, but those pigs from Daxia had such low damage that it took them too long to defeat a miserable gold-tier boss. The players continued attacking, and the boss HP bar had already dropped to less than half. With an excited smile, the team's mage encouraged everyone to give it their all, as it only had a little life left, and they needed to keep going for the final blow. At that moment, a spear pierced through his chest, killing him instantly and turning his body into lifespan. The one who killed him was King Shishir's subordinate. With a smile, he thanked him for his hard work and for the offerings of weaklings. Noticing this, the players panicked upon realizing they were facing the Spade Gang, a band of thieves made up of mysterious women from Daxia and foreigners. They couldn't understand how such beasts could exist, capable of guiding outsiders to massacre their own people. They began to charge at them, and the leader asked his men not to be afraid and to attack altogether since they were only a few people. Noticing that they were trying to resist, Qiang Shi promised to massacre all the pigs of Daxia and warned them to prepare to die. Her subordinate drew his double hammers and used the skill called Thunderous Tremor, creating a small earthquake which caused the players to become trapped in the ground. She drew her daggers, moved like thunder, and in the blink of an eye killed the players. She couldn't help but mock them. As for her, Daxia's men really were just a bunch of useless fools. Her eyes began to shine with malice, realizing that Daxia's authorities had already reported their information. However, this was useless as in her view, all of Daxia was nothing more than a garbage dump full of filth. Her friend mentioned that they were just ordinary players, so there was no way they could compete against them being backed by capital. While the corpses were transforming into lifespan orbs, she explained that although their true identities had not been exposed, for safety, they should leave Daxia as soon as possible and head to North America. She began looking at the ground and decided that then they would form a guild dedicated to hunting the Daxia pigs. The black man thought this was a good idea, but the other man questioned what name they would give to the guild. She began to show her dagger and decided to call their guild Alice. She fell to the ground and began imagining herself surrounded by black men. She decided that it was enough for today. It was time to disconnect and celebrate the founding of Guild Alice with a big party. With a smile, Captain and you began to wave at our boy and proposed to discuss together the prices of the hideout, informing him that they had already arrived. King Fong asked how much, and she mentioned that 1,500. According to our boy, this was too low. Captain Yu admitted that she knew that 1,500 was too low, so she had fiercely debated and managed to get the big boss to raise the price to 2,000. King Fong agreed to make the deal for the statue in the center of the ruins. He knew that Anu was smart, even so she tried to offer him a low price. A while later, our boy arrived at the statue and saw Captain Anu along with several knights. She blushed and with a smile mentioned that she had too much lifespan on her, so the High Command didn't feel safe and had organized a military escort for her. King Fong's eyes began to shine seriously. He knew this was nothing since the authorities still didn't know his true strength, and those guys only knew 1 or 2 moves. King Fong handed over the key and the system informed him that the transaction had been successful. He had lost the church sanctuary hideout key and in exchange had gained 2,000 years of tradable lifespan. After making the deal, King Fong decided to leave and Captain Anu said goodbye to him. The knights were somewhat confused upon noticing that she was willing to pay 2,000 years of lifespan just for this. She clarified to them that they didn't understand. This was a hideout that could house hundreds, even thousands of people, and no one but Shadow would be generous enough to give it up. The timely gift of lifespan from Anu was perfect. This meant that he could fully equip himself before heading to Magic City. King Fong immediately invested the tradable lifespan he had obtained. He consumed 71.2 years to reach level 15. Then he acquired a series of new skills, the mythic level 1, Blessed Liberation, for 161.7 years, the legendary 1, Assassin's Instinct for 71.12 years, and 3 epic level 1s, Shadow Ring Blade, Silent Concealment, and Darkest Hour for 36.35, 23.71, and 34.65 years, respectively. Finally, he spent 113.89 years on the item Mount Bell. Except for the equipment, everything else, skills, and level had been completely synchronized. His strength in the real world was now almost the same as in the game. The system alerted him that his hunger level had reached 90%. King Fong disconnected from the game and woke up in a cage at the Hoi Lun Hotel. The men noticed that our boy was awake. They drew their weapons, asking him to hand over the lifespan he carried or he would end up like the others in this motel. One of them mocked, celebrating that the apocalypse was great because it meant he could kill whoever he wanted. King Fong began to look at them with a penetrating gaze. Seeing this, one of the men furiously demanded that he hurry up and hand over his lifespan. The other man begged his boss to let him tear him apart. The man carrying the bat thought that King Fong was so scared that he had become paralyzed and decided it was better to simply kill him. Just before they could take another breath, a strange energy began to spread through the air. Our boy used the skill Shadow Ring Blade and not long after, the whole hotel started collapsing into pieces. King Fong took a pack of instant noodles. Realizing that the more power he drew into the real world, the more energy his body needed. At his current strength level, ordinary food simply was no longer enough. Our boy started eating the instant noodles, knowing that once he dealt with Kiang Shirshir and her guild called Alice, he would need to find a way to obtain the divine gifted book. Riding on his wolf, King Fong set off. He knew that she was incredibly cunning, much harder to track than Song Fei. However, he could use the mission killing Fong that he had previously accepted as bait to lure her. Hungry, he headed toward Magic City, intending to find something to eat along the way. At the same time in Magic City, King Xi was throwing a big party. According to her, her men were amazing. She hugged the 2 black men and mentioned that for her, the feeling of falling asleep and entering the game after their epic and exciting battle was simply incredible. The men praised her, declaring that her skills were absolutely unmatched. Amid laughter, they called her a crazy hot chicken. One of her subordinates informed her that Shadow had just sent a message. Qin Fong was already dead. He told her to meet in Magic City in the real world. He would bring her Qin Feng's head, and then collect the final payment. She knew that meeting with Shadow in real life was too risky. She mentioned that it wasn't necessary to meet in person and simply asked him to send a photo. Her subordinate explained that Shadow didn't use a phone because he was afraid of being tracked by the authorities. She couldn't help but smile upon noticing that Shadow was also hostile toward the authorities. Lately, their persecution had become more intense, and if they could take advantage of the opportunity to lure Shadow into Alice, the Daxia pigs would no longer be a threat. Because of this, she decided to stage a small play to test the waters and see which side Shadow was really on. She decided that she wanted to meet with Shadow first in the game, and sent him the coordinates. She went to the ruins and called Skywalker. She addressed him with affectionate words, asking if he was there and expressing that she missed him. Then she asked him for a favor, mentioning that she needed his help with a living one. King Fong was sitting and meditating. He was using silent concealment, a skill that allowed him to enter stealth permanently while remaining completely motionless. Noticing that she wanted to meet in the game, King Fong thought that Kyong-shi was really clever. These coordinates, Spectre Academy, were not far from him. He logged into the game and decided to see what kind of tricks she had up her sleeve. A few hours later, King Fong went to the Magic City ruins Spectre Academy. King Fong, still using invisibility, got off his mount. At that moment, some government agents appeared in front of King Shirshir. They announced that the authorities had located her Spade Gang, identified her as Spade A, and advised her to surrender immediately and stop resisting. Otherwise, they would be forced to take military action. With a smile, she asked Tianjin to go back and tell his men from Daxia to remember this well. They were no longer the Spade Gang. Now, they were the Alice Guild. Showing off her melons, she made it clear that they, the Alice Guild, specialized in killing Shirao's men. Tian Xingjian and his men couldn't help but blush. Furious, they cursed Spade, promising that Great Sia's officers would bring her to justice, calling her audacity shameless. With an expression full of excitement, she provoked the Daxia pigs to face her. She hinted that if they performed well in this show, she might become even bolder with them. That night, King Fong was watching everything. Tian Xingjian clenched his fist upon noticing that she was as stubborn as ever and swore to arrest her. King Fong remembered that he was Chu Hanan with the code name Tian Xingjian. He was a well-known informant who had provided intelligence to the Alice Guild, and who had only fallen in the 7th year since the start of the game. He found it interesting that Kang Shirshir and Ku Houndan were conspiring so early. He understood that both had orchestrated all this to test him. If he intervened to help Kang Shirshir, he would become an enemy of the authorities. If he didn't, Kang Shishi probably wouldn't meet Shadow in the real world. Our boy jumped and began descending from the sky. He used the skill Shadow Ring Blade and decided that this was the moment to show his sincerity. A strange red aura enveloped Tian Xingjian and his men, slowly taking away their HP. The system confirmed that he had slain Tian Xingjian and his men. Qiang Shirshir and the others were somewhat confused once the corpses transformed into lifespan. King Fong appeared in front of them and introduced himself as Shadow.